A toothache once forced people to let someone drill into their teeth with a stone tool, not in the Middle Ages, not in some primitive torture chamber, thousands of years before civilization as we know it even existed. And the strangest part? Many of them survived it. And some even came back for more treatment. That's where I want to start. Because somewhere out there right now, you probably have a tooth you've been ignoring. A twinge when you drink something cold. A dull ache that shows up around 2 a.m. and disappears by breakfast like it never happened. And you've got a dentist's number in your phone, and you still haven't called. Now imagine that same tooth, that same nerve, that same sharp little electrical scream, but you're standing barefoot on cold ground 100,000 years ago. No phone, no clinic, no tomorrow's appointment to look forward to. Just the pain, and the rest of your tribe pretending not to notice your face. And here's the thing that pulled me into this rabbit hole in the first place. We tend to assume ancient humans either suffered in silence or died young enough that their teeth never had time to betray them. Both of those assumptions are wrong. Spectacularly wrong. People in the deep past lived with tooth pain. They treated tooth pain, and in some cases they performed dentistry that would make a modern oral surgeon raise an eyebrow. So tonight we're going time hopping. We're going to bounce between the Stone Age, the ancient world, and your own bathroom mirror, and we're going to follow one stubborn little human problem across about 130,000 years. By the end of this, I promise you'll never look at your own mouth the same way again. Let's start where the story actually begins. Not in a city, not in a clinic, in a cave. Picture a small group of Neanderthals in what is now northern Italy, roughly 130,000 years ago. The fire is low. Someone is chewing on a strip of dried meat. And one of them, we'll never know his name, but archaeologists know his teeth, has a problem. 4 of his front teeth show deep, deliberate grooves, not from chewing, not from grinding, from something being pushed between them over and over in a very specific way. In 2017, a team led by paleoanthropologist Stefano Benazzi published an analysis of those teeth from the Riparo Fumene site. Their conclusion was quietly extraordinary. This Neanderthal had been using some kind of tool, a small bone splinter, a stiff stem of grass, possibly a sliver of wood, to manipulate his own teeth, to dig at them, to relieve something. The wear patterns suggested he was treating an impacted tooth, or trying to clean infected gum tissue, or simply doing what you do at 3 a.m. when something in your mouth will not stop screaming. He was, by any honest definition of the word, performing dentistry on himself. Let that sit for a second. A Neanderthal, with a toothpick, with a plan. Now the popular image of Neanderthals is that they were brutish, knuckle-dragging, barely people. That image is dead. It has been dead for 2 decades. The newer image, the accurate one, is of humans who buried their dead, cared for their disabled, used pigments, made jewelry, and apparently sat by fires and worked on their own teeth because the alternative was misery. The pain didn't go away, just because the toolkit was small. And here's where it gets stranger. They weren't even the first. Fast forward actually, let's rewind. Let's go further back, travel to roughly 7500 BCE, to a Neolithic farming village called Mehrgarh, in what is now Pakistan. People here grow barley, they herd goats, they make beads. And in 2006, in a paper that genuinely shook the dental history community, a team led by Roberto Macchiarelli announced something almost unbelievable. They had found 11 human teeth from 9 different adults with neat, deliberate holes drilled into the crowns, drilled into living teeth. 9,000 years ago, the holes were between 1 and 3 millimeters wide. The walls of the holes showed concentric grooves, the unmistakable signature of a rotating tool, almost certainly a bow drill tipped with flint, the same kind of drill these people used to make beads. Some of the teeth showed signs of healing around the drill site, which means the patient lived. Some showed wear inside the hole, which means they kept chewing on that tooth for years afterward. This wasn't ritual. This wasn't decoration. The drilled teeth were back molars, hidden in the mouth, useless for display. This was treatment. Somebody in that village was, functionally, a dentist. And I want you to really sit with the courage involved on both sides of that interaction. You are in chronic, blinding pain. Your face is swollen. You haven't slept properly in a week. And someone in your village says, I think I can help. Open your mouth. Hold very still. And you do it. Without anesthesia. Without the certainty that you'll survive the infection that follows. You sit down on the dirt, and you let another human being drill into your skull, because the pain you already have is worse than the pain they might cause. That is what tooth pain meant back then. Not an inconvenience. A negotiation with your own willingness to suffer. Now here's the part nobody tells you. The reason this is even a story is biology. Our mouths are not designed for the lives we live. Our jaws shrank over the last 20,000 years as we shifted from tough, raw food to softer cooked and processed food, but our teeth didn't shrink at the same rate. That's why so many of us have wisdom teeth that don't fit, crowded molars, and bite issues. The mouth you're sitting with right now is, in a very real sense, a slightly out-of-date piece of evolutionary hardware running on a brand new operating system of bread, sugar, and smoothies. And here is a fact that genuinely surprised me when I dug into it. Hunter-gatherers, broadly speaking, had spectacular teeth. The skulls we pull out of Paleolithic burials, the ones from before agriculture, often have full sets of teeth with minimal cavities. They wore them down to nubs from chewing tough meat and gritty plants. Sure. But cavities? Decay? That's mostly an agricultural problem. The moment our ancestors started farming grain, the rates of dental decay shot upward. Sticky carbohydrates feed the bacteria. The bacteria produce acid. The acid eats enamel. So in a sense, the story of tooth pain is the story of civilization. The more refined our diet got, the worse our mouths got. By the time you reach the ancient Egyptians, the pyramids are going up, and the people building them are in absolute agony. Now travel to roughly 2500 BCE. The Egyptian diet is heavy on coarse bread, and that bread is contaminated with sand from grinding stones in the desert wind. Every bite is essentially light sandpaper on enamel. Egyptian skulls from this period show worn-down teeth, exposed pulp chambers, and abscesses the size of marbles eating into the jawbone. This is when we get the first written reference to a dentist in human history. His name was Hezi-Ra. He lived around 2600 BCE under Pharaoh Djoser, and his tomb in Saqqara identifies him with a title that translates, more or less, to Chief of the Toothers, or Greatest of those who deal with teeth. He is, as far as we know, the first named dental professional in recorded history, a real person, a specialist, a man whose job every day was other people's mouths, and the Egyptians had a whole pharmacy of pain. The Ebers Papyrus, written around 550 BCE, contains recipes for toothache that we would recognize as half medicine, half witchcraft. Ground cumin, frankincense, onion, poultices of warm dough pressed against the cheek, mouth rinses of fig and beer. Some of these almost certainly did nothing. Some of them, and this is what's wild, actually had real pharmacological effects. Onion has mild antibacterial compounds. Frankincense contains boswellic acids that reduce inflammation. Willow bark, which shows up in multiple ancient pain remedies across the world, contains salicin. Salicin is chemically the precursor to aspirin. Think about that. The active ingredient in the little white pill in your medicine cabinet was being chewed off a tree 4,000 years ago because some ancestor noticed that the pain got softer when they did. Now travel to 500 BC. We're in ancient Greece, and a man named Hippocrates is writing about teeth. He recommends extraction for severely decayed teeth, but only as a last resort because, and I love this, he writes that extraction is risky and the tooth might not come out cleanly. He's right. Without forceps designed for the job, without leverage tools, without a way to stop the bleeding, pulling a tooth in 500 BC was not a small procedure. It was a small surgery with a real chance of killing you from infection afterward. A century or so later, the Etruscans in northern Italy were doing something even more remarkable. They were making bridges, actual dental bridges, out of gold bands, holding replacement teeth, sometimes human, sometimes ox, in the place where a lost tooth used to be. We've found dozens of these, and the craftsmanship is beautiful. These were almost certainly for wealthy women, possibly as status symbols, possibly to preserve speech and chewing. Either way, this is 2,700 years ago, and someone is walking around with what is functionally a prosthetic smile. Fast forward 800 years. We're in Imperial Rome, and a physician named Celsus is writing a medical encyclopedia called De Medicina. He devotes a whole section to teeth. He describes filling cavities, actually packing them with lint or lead to stop the pain. He describes how to extract a tooth properly by first loosening the gum with a small blade and then pulling slowly with the fingers, not the forceps, to avoid breaking the jaw. He warns against extracting upper teeth too aggressively because it can damage the sinus and the eye. This is a Roman in togas in the 1st century writing accurate dental advice. Some of it is still essentially correct, but I want to pull us back because the named physicians and the gold bridges and the papyrus recipes, that's the elite story. That's the small percentage of human history that got written down. For most of the people who have ever lived, none of that was available. For most people, tooth pain meant something much simpler and much more honest. It meant chewing. Chewing on cloves, which contain eugenol, a genuinely effective natural anesthetic that numbs nerve tissue on contact. Modern dentists still use eugenol in temporary fillings. The people of Indonesia and India were chewing whole cloves on aching teeth thousands of years before that chemistry was named. Chewing on the resin of certain trees, like mastic, which has antibacterial properties strong enough that modern studies still test it against oral pathogens. Chewing on the twigs of the Salvadora persica tree, the miswak, which has been used as a tooth-cleaning stick across Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia for at least 7,000 years, and which the World Health Organization has formally recommended as an effective oral hygiene tool. The miswak is wild to me. It's a stick that has outperformed several modern toothpastes in controlled clinical studies because of its natural fluoride content, its silica, its tannins, and its antibacterial alkaloids. A stick that people figured out by chewing on stuff and noticing what helped. That's the thing I keep coming back to. So much of what we call modern dentistry is just a translation into stainless steel and pharmaceuticals of things humans were already doing by trial and error, by paying attention, by remembering what their grandmother chewed when her jaw hurt. And there's a parallel here that I think about a lot. Other animals do this too. Chimpanzees have been observed picking specific leaves to chew when they have stomach upset. Capuchin monkeys rub themselves with crushed millipedes, whose chemistry happens to repel mosquitoes. Bears chew on osha root and rub it into their fur. The behavior of seeking out a plant or a substance that turns down the body's distress signal is not a uniquely human trick. It's a deep mammalian inheritance. What humans did differently is that we remembered. We told each other. We wrapped the knowledge in stories so it would survive the death of the person who first noticed. A grandmother says, "Chew this when your jaw hurts," and her grandchildren say it. And 3,000 years later, it's a paragraph in the Ebers Papyrus. Pain plus memory plus language equals medicine. And here is the moment in the story where things turn darker. Because we have to talk about what happened when the chewing didn't work. Travel to about 1300 AD. You are in a European town. Your tooth has been throbbing for a week. The infection has spread. Your jaw is hot. You can taste something foul. And there is no Hippocrates here. There is no Celsus. The carefully written Roman knowledge has mostly been lost to Europe. And dentistry has, for the average person, fallen into the hands of two groups: barbers and traveling tooth pullers who set up at fairs. The tooth puller's stall is loud on purpose. There's often a drummer, sometimes a man with a trumpet. The noise serves two functions. It draws a crowd, and it covers the screams. The tooth puller has a tool called a pelican, named because it looks like the beak of a pelican, and he uses it to lever the tooth out of the gum. Sometimes he gets the right tooth. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he breaks the jaw. There is no anesthesia beyond a strong drink. There is no sterilization. People die from these extractions. People also walk away cured. This is the moral weight I want you to feel. For most of human history, getting rid of tooth pain meant trading one form of suffering for another, with no guarantee which would win. The ancient world wasn't worse than the medieval world here. In some ways, the deep past was kinder. The Mehrgarh dentist drilling with a flint bit was operating in a culture of long experience. The medieval tooth puller at a fair was often improvising on a stranger he would never see again. And now look at us. You can have a tooth removed in 20 minutes. You can be numb in 90 seconds. You can drive home. You can complain on social media about the bill. The pain that used to dominate weeks of a person's life is now an afternoon's inconvenience. That is, by any honest measurement, one of the most extraordinary quiet victories in human history. We don't celebrate it. We don't talk about it. We just go in and come out and forget. But here is the contrast that lands on me hardest, the one I keep turning over in my head. Ancient people endured tooth pain because they had to. They had no other option. They sat by their fires and chewed cloves and waited it out and prayed to whatever they prayed to. Modern people endure tooth pain because they choose to. We have the dentist, we have the antibiotic, we have the chair. And still, somewhere around 40% of adults globally are walking around with untreated dental decay. Often because of cost, often because of fear, often because of the stubborn human habit of hoping the problem will just go away. The ancient version of you would not understand that. The Neanderthal with his bone splinter, the woman at Mehrgarh trusting a flint drill, the Egyptian worker chewing onion against his jaw. They would look at your access to painless, immediate dentistry, and they would weep at the gift of it. And then they'd probably look at you, sitting on the couch with a throbbing molar, scrolling past the appointment reminder, and they would gently, firmly tell you to go. There's a thread that runs through every era of this story. The Neanderthal at the cave fire, the villager at Mehrgarh, Hezi-Ra in his Egyptian office, Hippocrates with his cautious extractions, Celsus writing his careful notes, the medieval tooth puller and the patient gripping the chair arm, your dentist in her clean office, you tonight in your bathroom, the same nerve, the same bone, the same throb, the same small human in pain hoping someone, somewhere, knows what to do. The technology changed completely. The wiring underneath didn't change at all. So the next time something in your mouth twinges in the middle of the night, and it will, because it's a mammal mouth running on modern food, I want you to feel that line stretching back behind you. 100,000 years of people sitting by fires, chewing bark, holding their jaws, trusting strangers with sharp tools, all of them connected by one ordinary, miserable, deeply human ache. You're not the first person to feel this. You won't be the last. But you are, statistically, one of the first humans in the entire chain who can simply pick up a phone and make it stop. That phone call, made tonight, is the inheritance of every ancestor who didn't get to make it.